Well, it's very nice to be here again at Republica, and I'm delighted that you're here. What I'm going to be talking about is not as delightful as being here. It is what is happening in the world today, which is one feature of it, which I want to put under the umbrella a massive loss of habitat, in order to explain some of the new migrations that are happening. And I've been doing research on this now, and one way of starting is to say that we're dealing with two familiar subjects in the current migration: war refugees, and the other, the migrant. But that there is also a third. There's a third type of migrating subject for which we lack language. And I want to make that third migrant visible. And one way of making that third type of migrant / refugee really visible is to go to ask the question, why are they moving? There is no war where they're coming from. Why are they moving? Why are they desperate? And so the umbrella explanation that I want to give is that we're dealing with a massive loss of habitat due to climate change. And I must tell you, I think climate change is far too pretty a word. Climate change, yeah, it just sounds like give me more. So I call it dead land, dead water, which is what we have been making. So that is one reason. The expansion of mining, the expansion of land grabs, the expansion of cities. All of these processes have the capacity to actually force people off their land. And we're talking about people who may have been on that land for centuries, or for a century, but they don't have the papers. They do not have the instruments to show this is my land, so they can be thrown out. The estimate is every year 3 million, up to 3 million people are displaced by one or another reason. The main argument that I want to make is they are invisible to the eye of the law, to the eye of any kind of, did I make that noise? Any kind of authority. Somebody doesn't like what I'm saying. That is the issue here. And so my effort is, we've got to make them visible. We've got to make them into a subject that is recognizable to existing law, existing, modes of recognizing subjects. And frankly, I also think that this is just the merest beginning of that type of flow. This is going to escalate and escalate. Now, the refugee is a well-established subject. There is law, there is a regime, UNHCR. It may not work perfectly. It's actually imperfect. Everything is, frankly, imperfect. But there is a regime. When they appear at our borders, they can be recognized. The law can see them. The migrant is a very different type of subject. The migrant is a strong subject. She leaves behind a home, a farm, a family, a community. She wants to travel, make money, support that community. The evidence is overwhelming that migrants send a lot of their money back home. She's strong. This third subject that does not exist in the eye of the law, this displacement that goes on and on where there is no war, that is really the challenge, and that is what we need to work at. Now, let me start with some images that I think are stunning. I like to say, we made this. 20 years it took us to get from this, the Aral Sea, we all know where that is, right? One of the biggest internal seas, 20 years to this. You must say, that's a capability. It's amazing. That did not fall from the sky. We made that. We made that in multiple ways with a mix of elements, etc. And you have to say, it's amazing. Now, typically the word capability has a positive meaning. Amartya Sen. I'm not using it in the Amartya Sen sense. But I think this is a capability. It's a negative one. But I want to sort of riff on that and say, if we made this, what else can we make that is positive? Can we actually make new regimes that address some of the issues that I want to talk about? But the other thing is, this is loss of habitat. This was a huge sea. Now it's a salt field, so there's a whole new industry that can install itself there. But it has wrecked. This is an invisible history. This is visible because the scientists are documenting it. But what has happened to all of those communities, you know, such a huge sea, there is many, many worlds around that sea gone. Where do those people go? Some of them are probably illegal, you know, Lemechniks, whatever, in Moscow. So this is just one example. This is another example. This also, we made this in 20 years. It took nature billions to produce. We eliminated it. I mean, so what I'm also trying, besides the destruction, what I'm trying to get at is we make. So we should be able to also make on other vectors. Now here is something closer to some of these expulsions, these migrations that I'm talking about here. This is land grabs. Now land grabs have long existed. The United States used a lot of land in Kenya, for instance, to raise cattle, because cattle is quite destructive, we know that. Kenya has vast stretches of dead land, thank you, to the United States, using that to grow cattle. Same thing in Central America, a lot of dead land. So we have been killing land for a while, but there is so much of it. It's shrinking now. So here are some figures. This is just one sort of post-2008 crisis, new phase. And the estimate right now is that we're over 300 million hectares of land that have been bought. And again, think the image here is loss of habitat, that people are partly appearing at our borders, and it's especially Europe's borders at this moment, because Europe is surrounded by other continents, and Europe is sort of tiny compared to, say, the Americas. And what happens here is that there are about 100 firms, as I said, and about 15 governments. That does include the United States, but it also includes Saudi Arabia and China, etc., who are buying land, mostly to, in this case, this particular case I'm talking about, is to develop plantation agriculture. Now, to develop these vast plantations, and you know that plantation agriculture is a bit destructive of land, right? It does not enable land to have earth, just earth, to have a long life. Smallholder agriculture knows how to keep that land going for millennia. Plantation, no way. That's not the project. It's pesticides and fertilizers, to get huge, to get it growing fast, and it all has to look beautiful and I don't know what. So it's a lot of chemicals and stuff like that. Now, what happens here is that these smallholders, and you know this, they don't necessarily have documents that say, this is my land. I've been living here, or my family has, for a century, for 3 centuries, for who knows what. They don't have that. They're easily thrown out. Expansion of cities. they're easily thrown out. The city just moves in. Private communities, office parks, as they call them. Park had nothing to do with trees. It's just a collection of high-rise office buildings. There are about 500 new sort of cities, office parks, etc., that have been built in different parts of the world over the last 20 years. We're only going to be expanding our cities. So the image is this crawling apparatus. This is just now talking about construction, that moves into land that was once held by smallholders. Smallholders, I repeat, know how to care for the land. A city just covers it all with cement. Then there is, well, let me just show you a bit here. These are just figures. By now, the numbers are higher. As you can see, Africa, just look at the yellow ones. Africa is the highest, the most. But Europe has been growing very rapidly. You may not be aware of it, but let me give you two examples. This is about Europe now, land grabs in Europe. So, French, the sons and daughters of former farmers in France, given the bad job situation, this is something that happened about 2 or 3 years ago, decided, well, maybe the best bet for me is to go back to the countryside and buy some land and do some very specialized farming or, agriculture. Guess what? No land for sale. It has been mostly bought up by large corporates. Saudi Arabia has more or less bought up, and the Qataris, Bosnia. A lot of poor farmers. They are retiring very quickly. They are invited to retire. They're very happy. But the land, to grow wheat, to grow, a kind of crop that can only grow in that land. So when you begin to look, last example I want to give, England has a huge it has a lot of green land. A nice Swedish firm, this clothes maker, NHM or something like that, has bought a vast stretch of land in northern England. Now, why? I don't know. England is very wet. Maybe they wanted a bit more water than they get in Sweden. I really don't know what, but they bought it. Now, these are just examples of the north. Most of it is happening in, in Africa, really Africa, parts of Asia, and parts of Latin America. Now, another point that let me finish with this. Now, this is a very important datum, that so much of it is going into a mode of agriculture that uses a lot of poisons, these biofuels. The yellow is biofuels. Many people think that most of it is going for food crops, which would be fine as well, but though they would probably have plantation mode, so it's not great. But biofuels is really bad because that means you are growing crops that are not going to be for eating, so you have no constraints on the amount of pesticides, the amounts of chemicals, the poisons, whatever you're using. You are making that land dead. Now, again, I want to remind you, all of this is sort of under the umbrella, for me, of massive loss of habitat. All kinds of plantations are being developed, and when they killed, after 20 years, that plantation mode can easily wind up with land that is truly degraded, then they move on to the next point. And I don't have images to show you, say, for instance, water grabs. There's a lot you know about Nestle and Coca-Cola. You all should know. They managed to exhaust 2 underground water tables in particular areas of India, with very highly populated country, which now are without water. They depend on trucks brought in with water once or twice a week. Coca-Cola and Nestle are also exhausting water tables in the United States. And in the case of New York is a huge water reservoir. And Coca-Cola was just digging in, and they pay almost nothing for that. They pay what we pay for the water. And then they sell it to us, of course. And at one point, the governor told Coca-Cola, okay, you're out of here. California just discovered, the governor, that Nestlé was taking out water. And it told Nestlé, out. But you know, this is happening all over. In the meantime, another governor invited Nestlé to come, Nevada, and take water. Now, when you think about this is happening in the United States, it's happening in sort of northern countries. Imagine how the extraction works in global south countries. So this is extremely serious stuff. Now, the background story here, if we take the use of this land, the killing of this land, quick killing, the issue is really how it spreads, and more of it is getting lost, and more land is also getting killed via other means. So the image here is a real loss of habitat. And I want to show you some things that, again, this is thanks to scientists. Now, we're all familiar with what's happening in terms of, you know, temperatures, and this is an indicator of the death of Earth. So here are some of these. You know, this is the northern hemisphere. I'm not talking about parts of Africa or Asia that are truly sort of degraded. I'm talking about the northern hemisphere. So this is a land area with hot, very hot, and extremely hot temperatures. So here you have hot is this, the blue. This is very hot, and this is extremely hot. Now, that's just expanding. The United States has an area that it calls modestly the bread basket of the world. That's not a modest image, you understand. But it is the land where there's a lot of farming happening, very effective farming. When you travel through that, it looks either golden, beautiful gold, the wheat, or beautiful green, depending on the crop. So it looks alive. It turns out that, this comes from the scientists, that the temperature of the Earth is getting hotter and hotter and hotter. That means it is dying. It is simply dying. One day they're going to wake up and say, oops, it's done. And this has happened in California. In California, a lot of land is now officially dead. Now, this is the global north, where supposedly we have less population, certainly in the United States. Imagine, see, we don't have as good data for the global south, but imagine what it is there. Imagine what it is in certain parts of India. Imagine what it is in certain parts of Asia, etc. And here is one. By the way, all of this is developed and many more graphs in this new book of mine that is now also out in German. And I can't remember the name, but in English it's expulsions. So there is a lot of data about all of this. Now, as you can see, this is where water is already limiting agricultural productivity. And it is also in North America. But it is certainly it's all over the place. It's everywhere. So this is a massive loss of habitat. And if you look at our current policies, if we implemented all the, I'm talking policies, I'm not talking scientific discoveries and scientific instruments, just policy. If we implemented all the policies that we have sort of agreed on in the world, that is a little difference it would make. If we don't implement them, it's the broken line, the higher line. If we implement them, it's the lower line. Just a little like that, but the curve is still very sharp. In other words, we have much more negative coming. And again, the image here is this massive loss of habitat. Now, if you look at the global south, there is a whole new mode of, I don't know what term to use. I don't like the term imperialism here, but I want to juxtapose it to older imperialisms. So when Britain and France and, such were the big, imperial powers, one image you can have is they wanted the whole of Africa. They wanted the whole of whatever, Indonesia, whatever it was be. And they came with projects like the French, the famous Mission Civilisatrice, right? That all the children, no matter where in the colonies, all had to be studying French and be reading the same books as they were reading in France. Mission Civilisatrice. The British, the sort of officialdom, of the empire, to run the empire, India is the best case. The subaltern is sort of in the literature, one example. They had big projects. Today, we still have big powers moving into whole areas that are not their country. But it's radically different. And in that sense, I think that just using the language of imperialism is not quite enough. We should find other language. So for instance, China is a very good example here. So, and let me give you the latest case of China. So China discovered a whole reservoir of minerals and metals behind Rio de Janeiro. And so it went in, made an agreement with the government. It developed the mine. A mine needs to be developed. It developed the mine. Then it developed the highway to bring the stuff to a port that it also built in order to then take it back to China. When it is done extracting all of that stuff from the mine, in other words, the mine is done, it leaves. And it leaves, the road and the new port, it leaves it behind. And hospital for its workers, because they always bring in their own workers. So this is a very different mode. And coming back to everything that I have said thus far, one marking logic that you could use is that these are logics of extraction. And in fact, in my work, I argue that finance, as opposed to traditional banking, is also a logic of extraction. And extraction means once you grab it, you're out of there. You don't need it. It's not like, say, mass consumption being the dominant logic, where you want the sons and daughters to do better. Now, when you deploy this sort of imagery to the whole world, what we are dealing with is a massive loss of habitat. What we are seeing in Europe, those migrants who are not coming from war zones, and those who are not just well-established long-term migrations, there is that third sector. And that third sector is simply moving because they've been expelled from their land. Now, I am working in my current research on 3 flows. And one is Europe, but I want to talk especially about the 2 other ones which are less known. Now, the kinds of flows that I'm interested in right now are not simply produced by war. War is a massive event, and yes, people have to flee. This is all more under the vector of loss of habitat, but there is also war, like one of there is certainly violence involved. So a first one, so these are 3 new migration flows. Europe is one of them. And I argue that these flows are signaling, the 3 flows that I want to talk about, are signaling the making of new histories. And we should take it seriously. I think that that third subject that I talked about at the beginning is an emergent subject, and we're going to see much more of it. And there is, I repeat, no regime that allows us to recognize them and to say, okay, these are the rights they have, the claims that they want to make. Now, the first one comes from Central America. And it really is buried among all the other flows that are coming from the region. So both Mexico and the Central American countries, Guatemala, Salvador, Honduras. They have all kinds of migration flows. I am picking out a migration flow that does not fit the established modes, either refugee or, refugee as recognized by a war refugee, or the traditional migrant. And in the case of Central America, that one flow that often is sort of mixed up with all the other flows is unaccompanied children. That means people that are younger than 18. The youngest that we know of is 8. They're unaccompanied. They're without parents, without adults. Now, you all know the famous, the Mexico, coming from Mexico, how tough that can be, how difficult, etc. Coming from Central America, you first have got to deal with getting out of your own country, and these are all countries with enormous amount of violence. Then you have to cross the border into Mexico, tough, and then you have to cross the whole of Mexico, and then you wind up in the deserts of the United States if you're lucky. These are unaccompanied minors. We know that the United States has received, that they counted, that they, etc., and they don't know what to do with these minors because this is new. There is no law for this, no specific law. They have 160,000. They are all undocumented. They're all unaccompanied by grown-ups. There are also children coming with their parents. This is just by themselves. So this is mind-blowing. And you know what? When they arrive in the United States, we don't know how many have died, by the way, on the road, who have been kidnapped, who are now working on whatever plantations in Mexico. We don't have the full figures. That is just what the United States actually said, okay, here they are. So the United States doesn't know what to do with them because there's no regime, really. And so it keeps them sometimes, we know that some of them have been for over a year in these makeshift buildings, which are between prison and non-prison, but more like a prison. So this is a bit unreal. Now here are some of the figures. What I want to emphasize here, so this is Mexico. Mexico is this color here. So Mexico, for the longest time, was the key source of that. Here are these other 3 Central American countries, Salvador, Guatemala, and Honduras. And look at this. Again, this is unaccompanied children. This is not all migrations. This is just the children. It's somehow 2011, it begins to take off, 2012, more, and then it goes way up. Then there is a significant fall. You know why? Because the United States, and this is a fall in those who arrive in the United States. That doesn't mean those who leave. Because the United States asked the Mexican police and military to stop them and gave them money, at the Mexico with those countries, Guatemala, Honduras, and Salvador, those who were coming from there. Now, the Mexican police are not necessarily known to have a great sense of fairness or, care. So this is truly hell. We don't know how many are, what happens to them. But it has made an enormous difference in the numbers. Now, there is a lot to be told, and I'm sure that many of you are familiar with the horror of crossing Mexico. But this is, now let me just show you a few more just to nail it down. Here you see, this is another version. This is just those 3 countries, and you can see that this is where, by the way, the data a lot of the data comes from the government because the data is really based on those who make it into the United States. So the United States has the data, the government. But you can see that this happens at a certain moment. Puff, it takes off. Now I have a third one here on Central America that I quickly want to show. This is yet another. This is Mexico. There was a time when Mexico is totally dominant. And then look at this. Then you see these other 3 countries taking over. So when you put that all together, you have a question. You say, why? What happened? Why at that moment does it take off like that? Now, here is the simplest answer. This is the answer that the children give themselves, because they have been asked, they have been interrogated, so to speak. Why are you coming? Why are you leaving? And the basic answer is fear. Fear because these cities, as you know, those three countries, along with a fourth country that is not in the Americas, are the places with the highest level of killing in cities. Those places have been wrecked by the wars of Central America that were totally abusive wars where the United States played a very big role. And these kids are afraid. Many of them have lost their parents to death, and they leave out of fear. Now, I want to examine that question. It's fear. I accept 100% that these kids say, I'm afraid. I'm afraid. I'm afraid. I can't live here anymore. I'm so scared that they're willing to cross Mexico. They are not stupid. They know what it takes. And so fear alone is maybe something that you can say, okay, that is why they move. But you have to go back, and this is sort of a theme that recurs in this analysis of mine. What is happening from where they are coming? And I use that same analysis for the land grabs in Africa, etc., right? What is happening from the places where these people are coming from? And that is what we must ask. We must not simply ask when they appear at our borders, well, hey, show me, what is your legitimation? We must really begin to ask, what is happening in Africa? What is happening in Central America? What is happening? And of course, what is happening, for instance, in Central America, is a massive amount of land grabs, a development of mining, and a further expansion of already long dead land. So again, massive loss of habitat. That gets then intermediated via drug trade as one mode of making a living, and a lot of physical violence in the cities of these countries. But we can't just simply say, it's the drug dealers. We have to look at how we have wrecked the countryside, how we have wrecked the possibilities of small farmers to survive. We have plantation economy and we have cattle raising in Central America. It kills the land. So again, I just want to go to deeper factors, and I want to insist on the notion that we must begin to recognize this, this loss of habitat when we're dealing with current migrations. Now, Central America is extreme. It's extreme in many ways. It's much more extreme than, say, what is happening in Africa, which has so many countries, so many different situations, and more difficult to sort of explain, to make work. Now, the other migration I'm looking at, again, a very particular migration, is the Rohingya and the Bangladeshi. But let's just look at the Rohingya. As you know, these are Muslims living in a country that is mostly Buddhist, Myanmar. Here is the explanation. The explanation is some groups, particular sections of the Buddhists, which are about peace and love, have gone a bit crazy and are now saying, they have said this is true, but it's a particular sect. Okay, the only way to deal with Muslims is to kill them. Killing is justified. This has produced a sudden migration over the last 5 years. The count is 160,000 have left of these Rohingya. They have been there for centuries. They are peaceful. They are not, like ISIS types in Afghanistan or in Iraq, etc. No, they're not. Now, and that is the explanation. No, that's not the explanation. That's the formal explanation, but I say no, it is not. So I went there with my lenses on. This is how you are as a researcher. You use your particular lenses to see. So my question was, okay, let me check out, again, the loss of habitat situation here. Well, Myanmar, as you know, opened up its borders the regime changed, etc. a bit, to all kinds of investors, etc. Guess what? Massive development of mines. Myanmar is a bit of virgin territory in terms of the global corporate situation. So, hey, all this amazing stuff that nobody has exploited or extracted thus far. Massive mining, massive land grabs. The question of land and growing food or biofuel stuff is enormous throughout the world. We don't hear a lot about it in Europe because there are other concerns, but it's massive. So the crazy Buddhist monks who decided that it's legitimate to kill the Rohingya are being seen as the cause for this migration. No, the cause is very different. It's that millions, including of regular Myanmar people, Buddhists, just farmers, are being thrown off their land brutally. And there is a lot of other stuff happening in there, but the point that I want to make is that it's a massive loss of habitat that we see happening there, in the form of using land that used to be for farming, for living on and off, using that for, stuff that expels people. So millions are being. The Rohingya have just become a symbol of something that should be out of there, but it is really the wrong explanation. It's like with Central America, it's the drug dealers. No, it's a much deeper story. And here I don't know if people can see this, but the Andaman Sea, when everybody was talking about the Mediterranean, the ships with floating people, etc., our migrants, the same was happening in the Andaman Sea, where you had ships floating. You had the smugglers who made a business out of it. You had ships floating. The estimate is at one point in the Andaman Sea, this was also in the summer, 7,000 were seen in various ships. Many of these ships had lost power. People were dying. You had women and children crushed, by they were at the bottom of it all. And this is an amazing story. Now, the story has ramifications because you see that green arrow? They're coming from Myanmar into Thailand and Malaysia. So here, just a datum, just to give you a sense of what the hell is happening in this world that we just don't focus on. So this junction here, you see Thailand and Malaysia. So they found, because of these flows of people, a bit of attention went on. So they found all kinds of camps for basically prison labor, Thais and people from Myanmar, which were treated as slaves. The Thai fishery industry has long been known to basically, it's a huge sector, it's a very profitable sector, and they basically use people to, they use them like slaves, basically. Thai, desperate Thai people who come from the mountains, etc. But here they found more. They found mass graves where supposedly those workers who were too old or too belligerent, they killed them. This is a major issue right now. Now, also there, what you're dealing with is a strange mixture of elements, These people, there are so many Thais who are so desperately poor, and so much has been taken from them that they wind up in these terrible situations. So, now I have a few more graphs that I want to show you here. I don't know if you can see this, but this is, I can't. So these are here, I don't know if people can see it, but estimated boat people departures from the Bangladeshi-Myanmar border region. That's that region way up there. And so here you can see sort of some of the numbers, et cetera, et cetera. This is a key smuggling, that where you see that arrow, that sort of. And again, my image was when everybody was focusing on the Mediterranean, this past summer. Yes, there is a Mediterranean, and then there is the Andaman Sea. We're a whole other. Now, I just want to repeat something that I already said. I am focusing on very specific flows. You know, there are also in that region older, long-established flows. I'm speaking about flows that are emergent, that are sort of new, if you want, that are coming out of extreme conditions that we don't have good explanations for. And so out of that, then this whole question of a loss of habitat. So here are the trafficking routes, because traffickers, of course, they are the ultimate intermediary in this whole business. And as you can see, Bangladesh is also a source. There are Bangladeshis who are also leaving. And you can see, and so Indonesia, Malaysia, very important, but Indonesia has become, Indonesia, as you know, has like 15,000 islands that are not inhabited. And a lot of stuff is happening, it turns out, in those, nobody thinks about those 15,000 islands. But one thing that was found was the shipping, the fishing companies, the big fishing companies, they have settled some of these islands with their ships and their workers, and they keep the workers like in a prison camp. So in Malaysia, it has become very visible. So guess what? They're occupying some of those Indonesian islands. You know what 15,000 islands is? No government can keep control over that. So when I look at the world, I see a whole set of dynamics. These are extreme cases. I'm looking on extreme cases. I recognize they are extreme cases. But they produce a geography of, if you want, utility. How can we, these are geographies that are being used, like the Indonesian case that I just mentioned. And how, these are signals of extreme conditions. This is extreme. This is not the ongoing migrations. It's not even the ongoing refugee flows. This is something else. This is of a brutality that is almost inconceivable. Now here again, this is just the Rohingya. These are some of their migration routes. Now this is also a part of the world that many in the West are not necessarily that familiar with. But anyhow, you can see it for yourself. So I want to begin to conclude. I hope that we can have some questions. And when I speak about a massive loss of habitat, I am using the term habitat, or I aim at using the term habitat in its fullness. Habitat is the possibility of living, making a living. Making a living not as in making money, but as in, it could be making money, but it can also be making your food, selling food to survive, etc. Habitat in a thick, beautiful way. And the project, after having documented it all, not here, I didn't document it fully here, but in my larger writing, etc., that I'm busy with, the project really is to generate the possibility of the making of a subject. I'm talking people, not issue, people, who is profoundly affected by some of these trends. I've just described a few that are extreme ways in which we deal with the larger habitat of the world, starting with the Aral Sea and all of that, plus then the more particular developments, the destruction of so much land in Central America. Central America is one of the areas of the world that has the most dead land, more than Africa, dead land. That's the United States. That's all the plantation and the cattle raising. That's not bombing or war. That's just an economic mode. So there is something about how we have handled the global habitat that has had as one consequence the shrinking of livable space. So I think I mentioned it already, but the chapter that got me most going in my expulsions book was the last chapter, which I called Dead Land, Dead Water. Because really, just saying climate change is not enough. It's too pretty. So it's hard. we need to develop, this is my final image, we need to develop regimes that number one, produce a subject for the eye of the law, for the eye of the political, but especially at this point, let's just say the law, international law, that we can recognize, that we say, yes, this is a subject. We have done that for war refugees. Most countries in the world have some version of an immigration policy. We have done it for immigrants. We have not done it for this type of individual who simply has no place to live in because they have been thrown out, because war, because poisonous land from the mining or the plantations, etc., etc. And that is, in a way, my call. If there is one positive that I want to extract of what Europe has gone through in the last, really it started, I would say, it took off in November 2014 in the Mediterranean when the European Union said, we closed Mare Nostrum just at the wrong moment. Thousands and thousands of people drowned in the Mediterranean. At the same time, thousands were drowning in the Andaman Sea. They got far less attention. But if there is one thing that we can get out of the European case, is that there is a kind of subject that we have difficulty recognizing. We don't know what to do with that subject. And I think that the question for me and what Europe has given us is these types of migrants, what are they telling me about what's happening from where they are coming, if it's not war? And it's somehow neither is it that there is something good that they leave behind. These are migrants for whom home is now a plantation, a mine, it's covered with water, climate change, it's desert, climate change, or it's built up terrain. They are not the migrant, as I started out, the strong figure who leaves behind something that she wants to keep on contributing to and might go back to. Nor are they war refugees. There are no wars. And they are fallen into a kind of blank because we have no regime that makes them visible to the law, that we can recognize them and hence sort of deal with them. So that is sort of my call, and I thank you very much for your attention. Thank you.
So, thank you very much, Saskia Sassen. Are there perhaps questions? We have 5 minutes left. Are there? Yeah, of course.
Thanks a lot. My name is Helmut Schippert.
Can you speak a bit louder?
I try. The microphone works.
Yeah.
I work and live currently in India. I have worked before 6 years in Central America, and I have 2 questions. If I understood you right, you spoke of 3 million migrants of that third sector. I imagine that the number is only in India as big as that in 1 year. So where does this number of 3 million come from?
3
or
million
maybe I was just mistaken. Second question, just to be very short, to give someone else the chance. I didn't quite understand. I know the situation in Central America very good. It's a very complex situation over many decades and over many centuries. And I didn't understand quite well your argument of loss of habitat for Central America.
Yeah. Okay.
As long as it is more than the centers of these very dangerous cities that you mentioned.
Right.
Thank you.
Okay, let me just start with the second one, because that's, since you just put it in the air. So the typical explanation, those who are aware of this migration of unaccompanied minors, I'm not using all the migrants. I'm just using why are unaccompanied minors taking this absolute risk of leaving? That's the question, in the case of Guatemala. The typical answer might be, when you sort of speak with the people who are aware of all of this, is urban violence. Urban violence has escalated. You know, as I said, they are ranked among the most. This is a city story. And many of them have lost their parents, of course, 2 guns. You know, it's gangs. It's just out of control. And that is the immediate cause. That is what the kids will tell you. They will say, I'm afraid to leave the house because I can get killed. Like Honduras, I think the numbers are extraordinarily high, for that, among the highest in the world, as I said. Now, I accept all of that. Those are facts. Yes, urban violence is what makes those kids leave. I, as a researcher, I have to ask more. I say, what else? Why all this urban violence? What has happened? Why are these 3 Central American countries so absolutely extreme against a global context? At that point, I enter the question of, okay, how many people have actually moved from the countryside to the cities? Quite a few. There is almost no possibility to be, to have a reasonable life in the countryside, because a lot of it is large plantations, but a lot of it is dead land. So that is where I want to get at a deeper cause than urban violence. Urban violence is the standard answer and explanation, I repeat, and that's what the kids say. There is a truth to that. The question is, why? Why is it so absolutely extreme? Yes, there is the drug trade, but there is more. And I am always interested in seeing what is in the shadows of the most self-evident explanation. Out of that then comes looking at, okay, what is happening in the non-urban areas? You see, and then you get to this, a lot of that land is militarily controlled plantations. You know, that's not pleasant. And a lot of it is dead. Central America has one of the highest rates of dead land, given its total surface. So that is sort of what I was doing. Now, on the first one, what did you say about the 3 million? I didn't get that part. I can't remember. No, but who were the 3 million?
Maybe better someone other can ask a question. I thought you spoke of 3 million people worldwide of that 3rd sector, but maybe no. Okay, so forget about it.
No, I think it is probably many more, but it's not. No, I'm sorry, I didn't say that. But what I said is, now I know. The estimate is that being sort of expelled from your land is the estimate is between 2 and 3 million every year. And that includes a lot of small farmers. That's what we're talking about. And that is worldwide. That is happening in India. In India, since you are in India, a lot of land is being used to create these new urban, fancy, whatever, gated communities or whatever you want to call them. So that includes the whole world. That is, in Myanmar, this is now happening at a very accelerated scale. It wasn't happening 5 years ago. It's now happening. So that is that figure. So again, that figure was 2 to 3 million every year is the estimate from various experts all around the world. This is very complicated, and unreliable data. That was that figure. All right.
So, thank you very much, Saskia Sassen. Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.